So we're sitting in the backyard here, and I'm sitting with my good friend John Olander. And John and I have go back about 25 years. We've run into each other in a bunch of different circumstances and places, and it's always a pleasure. And John's gonna open us up with a poem here.
Okay, so Arnie, this poem's called Hello Fear. And it goes like this. Hello Fear, I know you're there because you get me with that icy stare. And though the time be day or night, I cannot run beyond your sight. You call to me to pause, retreat. You beckon me to choose defeat. On your advice, I wouldn't try. I'd make excuses, quit or die. But now I know the secret fear. I'm the one that brought you here. I nurtured you well all the time. I did not realize how sublime was my existence, my own being. You've had it, fear, 'cause now I'm feeling. We might meet again. You might beckon now and then. But I made you what you are today, and I own you, fear. Better get out of my way.
I love that poem, John. I love that.
Well, thank you.
So a couple things about John and I. John and I grew up in Park Hill. Um, Even though we didn't know each other, we were just a few blocks away from each other, and we shared the exact same birthday.
Crazy. How
Yeah.
about those stars?
So, John, you want to tell us about growing up in Park Hill?
Absolutely. So, uh, I went to Park Hill Elementary, and my mother was a teacher at Blessed Sacrament uh, Elementary School. So early on, the first 4 grades, I went to Blessed Sacrament, and what it got down to is my mother. Over time, we lost her. She had bipolar manic depressive, and she started going flipping out when I was about 10 years old. But she was an activist, and she was involved in integration in the Denver public schools, and I only found out about many of the things she did as I grew up in the neighborhood. But it was such a privilege because there was a lot of diversity, and in fact, when I was in high school at senior seminar in East High School, I became friends with a guy named Irvin K-Mac, and we fought Taekwondo together. But before I really knew him close, he came with my sister to our house on 2212 Birch, and they lived on 25th and Claremont. And he said, as soon as I walked in that house, I just knew there was no hate in this household. And that's kind of how we all were. There was a lot of kind of like you had to earn your stripes, and it wasn't, I wouldn't call it hatred, but there was tension between blacks and whites, no question about it. But as we grew together, we learned to love each other, and that I would say that was the privilege of growing up in Park Hill.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to a lot of that, John. A lot of that. So you and I met at the county jail
That's
like
right.
25 years ago or so. Yeah, man. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure thing. So I got into, I don't know what particular stint that was, Arnie, when you came in as that straight-laced look as Merrill Carter. Uh, but you were doing outreach to help people transition from jail. And I was in Denver County, and I had a series of uh, incidents that were, looking back now, all alcohol related, and mostly either bar fights or domestic violence cases. And I never was violent with my significant other, but we would fight a lot. And so I went to jail a lot. Uh, and that was when we first met. I'm not clear what particular stint that was, but it got to the point where I would go to jail so much that literally as soon as I arrived, they'd go, "Oh, he's back." and I'd be back cooking in OM. The one time I got there at 10:30 at night, and I was already in OM at 1:30 in the morning. So it's that's not the way you want to learn to be a cook. But that's what happened in my case.
Yeah, yeah, John, and you're a poet, a heck of a poet, um, and a writer.
Well,
What's that? What do you do that for? What do you get out of poetry?
you know, actually, I started writing at a Denver Public Library program, and it was called Hard Times Writers Group, and it was sponsored by Lighthouse Writers, and it was at Denver Public Central Library. And I've always been a reader, and I was good in school. I inherited my mother's brains, uh, but I never really wrote except because I had to. And so this was an outreach program at the library, and at the time I was struggling with my own life, and in and out of jail, in and out of homelessness, and in and out of productive things to do. So that was a deal that was productive for me. The way the group worked, called Hard Times Writing Group, it would normally have 30, 35 people, and only about maybe 30% of them were actually homeless, and the rest were just creative people. But it just developed a tremendous synergy, and I felt like, the first poem I wrote was a winner, and I could do that for you now. You want me to?
Sure, sure.
The prompt was, before you begin this, you must end this. Before you end this, you must begin this. And the poem goes like this. It's called The History Shelf. It goes, forget about the past, because it won't last. It's already gone, and it left fast. If you don't embrace the moment in hand, you'll end up in nowhere land. So do your best each day to love yourself, and put your history books on the shelf. And so that's where it all started. And then when COVID hit, the library group, which I'd been going to for several years, it didn't disband, but it went to Zoom, and there was a lot of turmoil. And then Matt Salas, a great guy who also was involved in that Hard Times Writers group, and also at Lighthouse, he founded a group that started at Same Cafe, and I've been going to that group ever since, over 2 years now, and it's every Thursday morning, and it's just something that developed. It's not something I saw it or knew that I had the talent for. It came from spirit.
Yeah. And what does it do for you?
Oh, it gives me a way to enjoy myself and feel validated, and also to help other people, just to reach out to them and create a different form of community that I did not know existed.
Yeah, John. I've always loved your poetry. So we'd run into each other in shelters, and you'd come over to my office over at Denver Health once in a while. Yeah, can you talk about your life a little bit more at that time?
Absolutely. The biggest thing is I was trying to get over, how did I create these problems for myself? Because I was very successful as a young man in the real estate business, both as a broker and developer. And then I just lost my way. And so, to your point, I was in and out of homelessness, struggling with alcohol, and also, but I had this rare ability to make a large amount of money quick and then just go on another binge. So when you saw me, Arnie, you didn't really see the success side of it. You only saw me when I was down. And then as we connected over time at Senior Support Center, and then when you were operating down at Building 9, that was just when I was trying to get well and hoping I could still keep drinking and maintain my social circle, not knowing how bad of an alcoholic I was.
Yeah, John. Every time we ran into each other, man, you were like a light, a beaming light. I mean, even though your situation was real tough, man, your humanity always like shone through. It was always a pleasure to see you.
Well, thank you. I try to help people concentrate on what's good, I've seen enough just in my education in my life and the people I associate with to know it's not always that bad. You can concentrate on blessings, and a lot of that comes from my mother being an advocate for others. And also, when I went to my dad's funeral, I was kind of shocked because I got released from jail to go there, and I show up and the whole church is packed. And I remember my first thought was, wow, for a guy that had no social life, this is unbelievable. Thank you. But what I did not know is how many people my own father had helped out just silently, uh, uh, helping other people. So I guess to some extent the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, but at the same time, uh, a lot of what you're given is you're just dealing the cards that God dealt you, or playing the hand that God dealt you. So that's just my natural tendency to be optimistic and to try to encourage others. And again, that's what God gave me. There we go.
All right, John. So we were talking about um, your life back when you were homeless off and on, like you said, and in and out of jail, and how much you still life was still pretty beautiful for you.
Yeah, because I could always find a place. I mean, I am a resourceful person, no question about that. And I, I think a lot of my resilience came from my own father. But, you know, I always, now keep in mind my background's in sales all my life too. So I always had this thought process that I was just that far from the solution. So maybe to my own detriment, I was overly resilient. I lived in a couple different sheds, one behind the Hare Krishna temple, one behind a friend of mine that used to be my family mechanic, and in various houses that I bought and sell, various couch surfing situations. But what I found in those situations that was problematic, of course, they were always drug and alcohol infused, which just perpetuated my problem. Now, as I sit here, 28 months sober, 29 on the 28th of this month, May of 23, uh, I didn't realize how bad I was, and I'm coming back and just feeling so much better. And I am happy for people that can find their balance. I had to quit, and it took me a long time to get that message, and that's all I could say about that. I don't think that had I had I not been in real estate, I don't think my problem had because I had made so many deals over time that I don't think there's any way I would have been homeless and so stubborn as I was because I was just used to pulling a rabbit out of the hat.
So you got 28, almost 29 months sober, man. That's pretty incredible.
Absolutely, and much of it I owe to Providence House and where I went. That was a humbling experience, particularly because to some extent it's not jail, but the criterion of the program is such that it's demanding. Uh, just in terms of time, it's like being in college because you have so many assignments and uh, things you have to complete to be in compliance with the program. But yet at the same time, uh, I used to, while I was in the throes of it, I would call it the price of admission, and I would say that to other people because I always felt good that I made the decision, and I just felt like I was going to have to carry it through. And I had several opportunities to leave, and I certainly financially it was not a barrier. But I really owe a lot to Providence House and to Bayout Enterprises where I work.
So John, I mean, what was the straw that broke the camel's back to say? I mean that you made the decision you're gonna get try and get sober. You're gonna
Oh,
start working on
this
it.
is an unbelievable story, but it really sums things up. So in and out of my homelessness, I had gone from place to place. In October of 2020, well, let me go back a little bit. So I was living with a friend of mine, Carol Walton, who I had, she had, and her husband had been caretakers for me, uh, meaning they watched my real estate over the years. They probably watched 20 properties as I redeveloped them over time. But what happened with that is one day I just happened to run into her at Walgreens across from Same Cafe. And I said, "Hi, Carol, how's Eric?" Well, it turned out that Eric, her husband, and her son had been killed. And she had been in a car accident and also had a brain injury. So she said, "John, you know real estate. Can you help me?" So I ended up suing Atlantis for getting her voucher and everything back, getting her back on her feet. But unfortunately, during that process, she had, uh, because of her brain injury and because we were both still drinking, she had seizures, and I saved her twice, and I found her dead the third time. So that happened in March of 2020. On 4/20 of 2020, my son, who was just beyond himself despondent with my behavior, 12th and Spruce, and essentially help him a little bit and be a not a caretaker because he's very self-sufficient, but to help him out because he was in a wheelchair. So I got a good place. I could help him a little bit, but it was conditional upon me not drinking because he knows my history. Unfortunately, I violated that agreement. So one day, just before Christmas, I'm out. It was not an part of the house. It was a converted garage, which he used as both a gym to keep his physical fitness up and a place to meditate. And that's where I lived. And I was drinking, playing the piano a little bit. And all of a sudden, I hear this. Zit, zit, zit. I go, "What was that?" And he was changing the locks and kicking me out. So this was just before Christmas, and I was pissed. I was drunk, of course, and I was mad. But it was right before Christmas. I had money. I went to a motel, and I can only describe it, Arnie, by saying I had a spiritual experience where Spirit said to me, "Man, you shouldn't be mad at him. You should be thanking him for saving your life." So then, on the 27th of December, I checked out of the hotel, and I had bought a brick. Both my son and I graduated from East High School. So at Thanksgiving and for his birthday and for Christmas that year, I bought him a brick at East High School. It says John Olander, 1976, Stephen Olander, 2002, and below it says Angels Always Rise. And the reason that's relevant is December 27th, 2020, the last day I drank. I was at St. John's Garden, where I have a garden to this day, and I was sitting out there having a beer. And a lady came up to me. She goes, "I know it's a little after Christmas, but you're always so cool to people. You always help out people, and you always clean up after everybody. So here's a little something for Christmas." And I go, "Wow, I guess the Lord wants me to get drunk today." So I went over to Argonaut, got some more, ended up at City Park, 4:30 in the afternoon, going, "Oh, I'll never make it to that through the night." And on the way to the liquor store, I had a seizure, and I ended up at the veterinarian place on Colfax and Garfield. Next thing you know, I'm in the hospital. Next thing you know, I'm on detox, in detox, on December 28th, 2020, which happens to be what? My son Stefan's birthday. And I call him up from detox. And he goes, I don't need a rock or a brick. I need a rock. And if you're not sober, uh, I'll never talk to you again. So that's when I decided to seek treatment. So that's a long-winded answer to your question with a lot of backstory, but it's all relevant. It all led up to, but ultimately it was my son saying, if you don't get sober, I want nothing to do with you. And that had happened on his birthday.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, John. What a story. And then I remember a few weeks after that, I mean, we ended up working together at Denver Day Works, right? Um, maybe a couple
That's
months.
right. I'll never forget that because I actually had gotten into the program at Prov, but I can't remember if I was still, I think I was still at TRT or waiting. No, either I was in Denver Cares or TRT waiting to get into Prov or I was already in Prov. But the day after I went to the orientation, it was a blizzard. And I came to work. I said, I don't care if it's a blizzard or not. I'm not missing my first day of this job I just got. And I showed up, and who was the supervisor? But Beryl Carter from the Denver Sheriff's Office. He had much longer hair than the old days.
Yeah, that was a surprise and a pleasure both, man. Yeah, and we were working. A few weeks later, we ended up working in a park, and you stumbled on a few beers. Remember that? Full
Yeah,
cans of beer.
yeah. At that point, I was committed. I said, "Well, I'm not gonna drink it," and I poured it out. And it is. There's no question in my mind that once I went to that, made that decision that I wasn't going to try it just by going to York Street, or I could drink wine on Saturdays, or I'll only have a little wine with dinner when I go out on a date, or whatever. At that point, because of my son, I said, I don't care what happens, I'll never drink again. I ain't going there. So, but yeah, that was confirmation of it, wasn't it? Because I found those beers and I poured them out.
Yep. Um, yeah, that was a kind of a beautiful day, man.
Yeah, you were with me when it happened too.
Yeah. Um, so John, tell me about working at Denver Day Works now. How long you been doing that?
Well, I was working and I would show up. Jane, who I love, I'd show up every day and try to get on. And because I was a hard worker, she would let me work quite a bit. And then it just evolved to where they were asking around, we need to find somebody with a license. I said, I have a license. One thing I was smart about in my alcoholism, Arnie, is I never drove and drank. I got caught a couple times when I was younger, and I was able to, believe it or not, to talk myself out of 3 different DUIs. But that, of course, that would never happen now. But once I narrowly avoided those fates, I I got in the habit of never drinking and driving. So I compromised everything else in my life with my drinking, but not my driving privileges. So working at Denver Day Works has been a tremendous advantage for me as a driver for on the Rhino crew. Is it still going?
Yeah, yeah, we're good.
Okay. So yeah, and that evolved to where I never would have worked at Bayard, but for COVID. But also, once I got there and understood the mission and understood that there were a lot of guys just like me that just needed a chance and a little structure to get on their feet, it's been a tremendous advantage for me, a great, great thing in my life. And it was both a combination of the housing that Prov provided with structure and having a place where I could work hard and stay focused at Bayard and Denver Day Works that really has put me back on my feet. I need to tell you another story too, Arnie. I'm not sure you know this, but what happened is when I was at the last October all staff meeting for Bayard, and Dave Henniger, the founder, was giving a talk about the history of Bayard and how he started as an intern at Fort Logan. He was talking, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I realize, and I just start crying at the table, and they go, "Are you okay?" And I go, "I'm okay, but I just realized something that is almost beyond belief." And what happened, Arnie, is it turned out one of the original clients of David Henniger prior to going and founding Bayard was my own mother, Virginia Amanda Nestor Olander,
Wow.
who used to go to Bayard. Now keep in mind, at the time, I'm 10 years old, but we know, oh, Mom's going to Fort Logan. That so talk about full circle. It's pretty much hard to believe. I got on the phone and I called my son, and we both started crying uh, about that. At that point, it's clear to him that I'm going to be sober, and it was just like a magical thing from heaven uh, that nobody could make that up.
Wow, John. So what keeps you going, man? I mean, that's a beautiful story, and you've been through so much, and you just keep on moving on, man. What motivates you? What keeps you going?
Well, the things I've done where I've been successful is I really have changed the game. So the things I'm working on now are will be fundamental game changing. Going back to my real estate career, I rewrote financing. I was involved in the creation of some pretty profound things like Realtor.com and what is now Rocket Mortgage. I was involved in the change of agency law. Uh, I was involved in changing the game in foreclosure. And now what I'm doing is children's nutrition, and hopefully where kids will all be growing their own food off of aeroponic growing towers. And so the things I chase really are game changing. And whether or not I'm participate financially or uh, really get the credit for what happens, I really am not attached to that outcome because I know that what I'm doing is spending my time for the greater good of all, and so it works out one way or another. If if I'm just a catalyst, that's okay with me.
Yeah. Um. So what's your philosophy of life, John? Do you
Uh,
have one?
yeah, uh, uh, it goes back to real estate, and when I got my confidence from one thing, I was able to get these professional sales tapes and also uh, a program from a guy named Dr. Dennis Waitley that was called The Psychology of Winning. And it goes, you always move towards your currently dominant thought. So take the time to think about what your thoughts should be and how you can convey those to other people and the impact what your thoughts are will have on other people. So I was privileged to learn from those people. Tom Hopkins said, I don't care what your charm, your glib, your wit, your personality, your charisma. The person that leaves this room and sees the most people that could say yes will make the most money. Don't ever forget that. Real estate is a percentage business. That's one. Dennis Waitley said, uh, again, you always move towards your currently dominant thought. And I could tell you a poem of his that I memorized and say all
Sure.
the time. It goes, crystal ball, oh crystal ball, will my empire rise and fall? Like the Roman legion must, ash to ash and dust to dust. It's not a scrimmage or a practice game, and there's no martyr's hall of fame. Time, the speedster, takes his toll, and every day's the Super Bowl. Losers live in classic style, this never world called someday Isle. They blame bad luck each time they lose and hide in sickness, drugs, and booze. But losing's a habit, and so is winning. And the way to change is by beginning. To live each day as if you're last, not in the future, not in the past. I close my eyes and truly see the person I most like to be. I think I can. know I can. Become my greatest coach and fan. And I love myself, but I'll give away all the love I have today. I think I can. I know I can become a most uncommon man.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Credit from Dr. Dennis Waitley.
Did he write that?
Absolutely. And I memorized it, and that changed my whole self esteem and projection of my life. And it helped me impact a lot of other people too, and they tell me so to this day.
Yeah. So you said you're feeling much better in the last 2 years, John. Um, feeling better and better. In what ways? What do you feel that's different?
Well, physical part of it is obvious because I had degenerated physically such that I was having trouble walking because I have neuropathy. That's getting much better. I've always been active. I was only able to survive all that because I was an athlete for so many years. I played soccer for many, many years. I also fought taekwondo. But I didn't realize how bad I was because I was always drinking. So that pain was always numbed. And I was drinking a lot. But that said, once I realized how bad my physical health was, and quit, it's been steadily coming back, and I'm feeling well. Just in terms of mental, uh, I don't think negatively. I never was negative. I was always overly optimistic. Some people would tell you, but at the same time, now I just don't get upset when things don't happen the way I wanted them to. And I'm certain with what I've been able to study and the various things I've read and implemented into my own life, it has impact on a day to day basis. The time you take and spend in feeding your brain is just as important as working out. And also, just to be still and to be present. I'd say that's the biggest thing I've learned is to take time each day just to be still. And I am a believer, although I think that some elements of Christianity are kind of jammed down your throat these days, and there's a lot of turmoil in the various denominations right now. And that's because our culture doesn't match with what's going on there. However, uh, I had a lady get me in the habit of reading Proverbs every day. And so I started out every day, and I still remember the date, it goes back to July 21st, 2021. And I started reading Proverbs every day and saying the third step prayer every day. And for those that don't know it, it says, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of bondage of self so that I might better do thy will. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. So that I can abide in. That I can embrace. And when it comes to uh, if you worship Krishna, one of my best friends is a big time Krishna person. One lady that let me live in her shed because we worked together at Epicurean Catering was a Krishna. All of those people were trying to get me well, and I was fighting it because all I had to do was be sober. And as I sit here and talk to you today, it's day 869 of sobriety.
That's amazing, John. Yeah. Um, this is a question I ask everybody who's a parent, and I think it's really important. What has your son taught you?
Mm. Oh man, I think he's taught me to be silent in the midst of pain. Uh, uh, he's an impressive man, uh, and I'm proud of how I handled the breakup of his mother and I, who today remains my good friend. Uh, and I know my life would have been very different if we had stayed married. I will tell you that my son talks to friends of his that he's the man he is because of me. Let me tell you a quick story about he and I getting together because we used to I used to bet all the time on the Kentucky Derby. In fact, I had a big time party for many years for the Kentucky Derby. My friends and I were famous for that party. Towards the end, it was 500 to 700 people. So this past first Saturday in May, it always is, I was with my son, just he and I. He was dog sitting. We put some bets down, didn't win. While we're sitting there talking and enjoying each other, we talked about how he grew up and he used to play. We used to always play darts and pool a lot. And he had a dart board sitting right there. And he said, "You want to play?" And I go, "Man, I haven't played in 25 years. He goes, "Oh, that's all right." So we played a game. My first dart, I missed the board. I didn't even hit it at all. It fell in the cabinet. And then I go, "Oh my God, I knew it was going to be bad." The next two, bullseyes. And he goes, wait, don't take those out. I got to get a picture. And I go, "I'm back." So I guess what my son taught me over time is not to give up, and that recognizing the people that love you, it's important that you don't let them down.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else you want to add to people? Anything else you want to tell them about life or about John?
I think it's important that you're always vulnerable and don't hold things in. Tell your story. People need to hear it. One, it's cathartic to you, and two, perhaps you'll just steer somebody in the right direction. So just be vulnerable, tell the truth, and how about if I close with one more poem, Marnie?
Please do.
This one's called Integrity. And it goes, "Did I ever have total integrity? Hell no. And it managed to create considerable woe. For me, not them. What an idiot I was. And I didn't even have a solid because. So I've learned from that to tell the truth at all times. Don't be selective. Doesn't always happen, but it's a worthy objective."
It's beautiful, John.
That's it.
Well, I appreciate you spending this time with me, brother, and I love you, man. And
back at you. I like you better without that blue, clean cut look. All right. Cool.
Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.